Hey, welcome to Grounded with John Tester and Maritza Giorgio. Was it 90 degrees where you live over the weekend, Senator?
It was, yeah. It was, went to Great Falls, got a haircut, and it was actually in the pickup, 93 degrees driving down the road.
Holy cow, it was so hot here. It was so hot, but it's June 1st. Holy cow, it's summer.
Well, it isn't supposed to be summer till the 21st of June, okay?
That's right. Summer.
Technically, still springtime in the Rockies.
I have been over the past few days just kind of absorbing and thinking about our conversation with Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. I've had a ton of feedback. How about you?
Yeah, look, Tim's a good guy. We knew that going in. I mean, that's why he was picked for vice president. He's a straight up, honest, normal person. You don't find that a lot in Washington, D.C., and that's confirmed, by the way, every week in the actions that people in the executive and the legislative branch take. It shows you that normality is a hard thing to find. Tim Walsh is normal. He's a good guy, hard worker. And look, from my perspective, it's unfortunate he's not in the vice presidency today.
Yeah, it was a really nice conversation because it was organic, it felt natural, and I heard that from people, and that's really what we wanna do here is just be ourselves and have conversations, the same kind of conversations we have when we're not recording. So for today, we do have a conversation with two authors of a political book about the 2024 campaign. No, 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 not that book, not the book we're seeing everywhere right now and all the chatter around Jake Tapper's book. But this one takes a look at kind of a broader view of the campaign from both the Biden and Trump camps as a whole. And we're talking to the authors of Fight Inside the Wildest Battle for the White House. This is Jonathan Allen and Amie Parnes. And they interviewed more than 150 people for this. And it just gives a really in depth look at the inner workings inside of the Washington political machine on both sides here.
Yeah. Excuse me. Keep going.
Okay. So, for full disclosure, we recorded this conversation literally right before the news of former President Biden's cancer diagnosis. And we just decided we'd let that news breathe for a beat before we release this episode. Of course, we wish the Biden family, President Biden and his family, the very best on this really difficult health journey. But nonetheless, this book is out and we want to talk about the campaign.
Yeah, this is a postmortem on the campaign and what went wrong mostly, not what went right, but what went wrong. And they go into both camps, by the way, not just the Biden camp, but also the Trump camp. And it's an interesting conversation. But
We hear a little bit from you in this conversation, kind of about the campaign and some calls you've had and decisions you've made, so it's interesting.
yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, look, we recorded this a few days ago, so I don't remember what was said, but I'll just say this, and if it's repeated again in the conversation, I'll say it. But there was an ad that was run for, I don't know. There was just a debate, quite frankly, between Biden and Trump. That was the end of June, I think, about the 20th of June, about a year ago. And the ad took a clip that I did on an NBC interview when they came out the farm here, and they asked me how Biden was doing, and I said, I think he's fine. Because I did at that moment in time. But as we all know, and if we don't, we'll just tell you this, and this isn't a cruel statement like Joni Ernst said, but when things go on, you don't tend to keep your fastball the older you get. I mean, it's just a fact of life. And he was obviously, as this book points out, and other books point out, that he was declining and had good days and bad days. And if he was declining when I talked to him, it must have been on the good days because I don't think I
Mhm.
visited in person with Biden after we did the. I think after the last one I had was when we did the press conference on the infrastructure bill that 10 senators wrote, and I was one of the 10. So
Yeah.
uh, yeah, so it was good. It's a good conversation, and they did some hard work. And this isn't the first book that Alan and Parnes have written, but probably won't be the last either. So
Yeah, they've written quite a few on campaign, so we'll get all into it. But first, let's talk about some headlines. Hey, um, do you have a meeting with Elon Musk today?
no, I don't.
Oh, know, but it looks like he's taking a big sky vacation. He's in our backyard. A local journalist in Missoula posted that an account that actually tracks his private plane shows he landed in Missoula, and there are reports that he's staying at a high-end luxury resort outside of town, so I just figured maybe you had a meeting with him.
No, I don't. I have a policy. I don't meet with drug users. It's hopefully,
I better get out of here then.
no, we don't. Normally, uh, well, I'd say 2 things. First of all, good choice. You know, there's no better place to go on a vacation than Montana. The second thing I would say is that, truthfully, I really do hope he's not in an altered state, which I don't know if that's even possible.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of reports. For the record, I was joking. I'm not a drug user.
I took you absolutely serious. I 100%. So,
Okay, so speaking of Musk, the Wall Street Journal is reporting that President Trump had a question about Musk and all of those Doge efforts of, just slashing through the federal government, reportedly asking, was it all bullshit? Doge goals continued to move here, as we saw. They originally targeted $2 trillion in cuts, then it went down to 1 trillion. In the end, Doge says it cut 175 billion. As you and I, Senator, have talked kind of privately over the last few days, there were the efforts had other effects that were beneficial to Elon Musk.
yeah, that question should have been asked before he started the process. What are the goals here? Because quite frankly, I think Elon Musk hit every goal he had. He got information she had no business getting into private accounts, and accounts on his business dealings with the federal government. He had access to all that. Congress had they had zero impact on any of this. Their voice was not heard at all, and their voice wasn't much to be heard, quite frankly, I would say. And, yeah, that's right. People were saying this was bullshit while it was going on. Elon was wielding a chainsaw and, was out there for prime time entertainment purposes when he was doing things with the government that he had no business being able to do. Not a confirmed person, a immigrant from South Africa who Trump gave the keys to the federal government to, and he just went in and raised hell, got the information he wanted, and then he said, "Oh, guess what? I'm out." Doing whatever he's doing. I guess vacation in Montana now.
And the contracts. I mean, he has, how I can't remember the number now because
38 billion.
yeah,
38 billion. And by the way, he didn't cut any of those. Those weren't in his cut pile.
yeah. Your former colleague, Senator Joni Ernst of Iowa, made a lot of headlines over the weekend. She's doubling down on some comments that put her into the spotlight, too. She was being grilled at a town hall. We've seen these town hall videos of, constituents asking questions. What's going on? What about these cuts? What about this budget? And specifically, she was being asked about cuts to Medicaid and this big, beautiful bill that the Senate's going to vote on here or debate at least in the next few weeks. And someone said something to the effect of, people are going to die. And she said, well, we're all going to die. And on social media later, she responded with a sarcastic apology, but we're all going to die. Does it feel very hopeful?
Yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, congratulations. We had a Republican do a town hall meeting. That's a great thing. We need to have more of them do that so they can hear from their constituents. She heard from her constituents and obviously didn't like the question. As you know, being a reporter, politicians tend to try to pivot. She
No.
pivoted right into the tar pit. But what makes it even worse is the apology, referring, I think, to the tooth fairy, um, just shows a total lack on her part of understanding the impacts of the cuts that are in that big, beautiful bill. And it's no wonder she flipped in about 3 hours on Pete Hegseth, because this is exactly the kind of stuff that people who aren't well grounded, no pun on the podcast, that aren't well grounded do. I just it's just unbelievable to me. I've I've played enough funerals, played taps at enough funerals. My parents are gone. I've lost friends who have passed away to say, live with it. tough shit. We did it. Go to hell. This is the way life is. You're going to die. Get ready. I mean, really. I mean, it's just, oh man. Tom Harkin is looking at this and he's got to be shaking his head, big dog. That's the guy she replaced. So it's amazing.
If I just think like we could all use this justification for anything. I mean, we're all gonna die, so why should we go to the doctor? We're all
Yeah.
gonna die. Why should we eat healthy? Why should you work? Why should you go represent your country in the United States Senate? Because we're all gonna die anyway.
Yeah. Why should you invest in health research? Why should you go to school? Why should you, start a business? Why should you do anything? Because you're just gonna die. And then talk about the tooth fairy or Santa Claus or leprechauns or whatever. It's too bad. That's all I'm gonna say. It's just too bad.
Okay, the president is calling out Senator Rand Paul by name on social media over his outspoken comments against the big beautiful bill. And also on social media, the president announced he's raising tariffs on steel and aluminum from 25% to 50%.
Look, I mean, if you look at the big beautiful bill, they're slashing a bunch of programs and adding to the national debt. So what are we doing here? Um, I mean, really, what are we doing here? We're giving tax breaks to the rich so we can increase the national debt. That's basically what's going on with that bill. And it's not just rich people that I know. I mean, I don't even know any of these rich people that are getting these kind of breaks. I mean, it's the folks who got more change in their pocket than my family's ever had in generations of hard work. And it's just it's sad. So look, I've had a lot of disagreements with Rand Paul, but I think he's right on this one. I think he's right on the tariffs, absolutely, and I think he's right on the bill. I think the bill needs to be taken back and reworked so it works for working Americans in this country, and and then put out a big beautiful bill that's actually big and beautiful. Maybe not quite as big, but it can be beautiful.
Well, Elon Musk said it could be big or it could be beautiful, but it can't be both.
Yeah, but he was probably on what, ketamine or something like that when he said.
When the well wishes seem to be over for President Trump because he shared a conspiracy theory on a social media account that former President Biden was actually killed in 2020, like actually not alive anymore, and replaced by, quote, clones, doubles, and robotic engineered soulless, mindless entities. So I shouldn't have to say this out loud, but I will. This is a baseless claim. This comes after the president went after Biden and his cancer diagnosis, saying that people should not feel sorry for him because he's so, quote, vicious.
I mean, what do you say? I mean, we just had a U.S. senator talk to a bunch of her constituents and say, "Well, get over it, you're going to die." So what the hell? We've got folks out there that are making up these conspiracy theories, and you've got the president of the United States every time he gets a chance dumping on a past president, which I never remember ever happening. But that's fine. I mean, look, it's free speech, so he can do what he wants. But it does tell me that maybe the past presidents ought to stand up and talk about this president and what he's done in the White House, because quite honestly, they need to do that. They know how this country works. They know why it has always been, well, at least since World War II, the greatest country that's ever existed in the world, and probably a lot longer than that. And so I really think it's long past time for Clinton and Bush and Obama to start talking about the presidency and what we should be expecting of the most powerful man in the world. Because this kind of stuff is just, it takes away from just like the Oval Office visits, just like all this other stuff that he brings up that has no merit to it, says one thing and does another. That's not how you maintain your position as the greatest country in the world. And we are the greatest country in the world. I think we're still the greatest country in the world, but certainly been eroded a lot over the last 4 or 5 months.
Last week, we talked to former National Security Advisor John Bolton, who worked in the Trump 1.0 administration. And he was talking about how President Trump really, it's not even about loyalty, it's about fealty. And so this headline kind of piqued my interest here because the president says that they are now going to prioritize what he calls patriotic Americans for federal jobs. And as people apply for government jobs, they're actually going to be required to write essays explaining how they will advance President Donald Trump's policy priorities.
So his definition of a patriotic American is somebody that believes exactly as he does in his policies. That is not a patriotic American. That's a person who is going to be in a situation where they have a dictator as the leader of their country. And that is what's scary. Look, when he got in office, the first thing he did was get rid of the IGs. So there's no transparency and there's no accountability. And he's done this stuff over and over and over again. And now he's doing exactly like dictators. Erdogan did this, and others have done it. And it's you get rid of people who disagree with you, so you only have the folks who are loyal or express fealty, as Bolton said. It's difference in thought is not a bad thing. In fact, diversity isn't a bad thing. Equity isn't a bad thing. Inclusion isn't a bad thing. It usually ends up with a better decision. Take a look at the big, beautiful bill. There was no inclusion there. It was all done by one party, and you end up with a bill that's totally, totally insufficient to deal with the issues that face this country. And it is totally insufficient.
Let's get to our chat now with best-selling authors and journalists Jonathan Allen and Amie Parnes, who have a newish book out called Fight Inside the Wildest Battle for the White House. So a little story for you here, Senator Tester. I first met John in Missoula covering a Trump rally when he was trying really, really, really hard to unseat you in 2018.
So, John, have you been back to Montana since 18? That's the question.
I have not been back to Montana since 18, but I did go a couple of times, I think, that year for Trump rally. So it wasn't
Yeah,
just Missoula. I think I was also in Great Falls for a Trump rally that year. Beautiful,
yeah,
beautiful country.
yeah. It's a great state, and he was there during the summer, so you got to see the best of it. Good to visit with you, and we can talk about Montana a little bit. And Amie, it's good to have you on.
Thank you so much, Senator. Thanks for having us on.
Okay, so let's start with the book. I mean, this is really kind of the chronological backstory to 2024 and the presidential election. It starts out with the night of that disastrous debate between President Joe Biden and his challenger, Donald Trump. So many things, you guys, that in reading this, it just brought me back like, oh, I forgot about that. Or, oh, I forgot that happened, because that's the kind of the nature of the news cycle lately. But I remember being at the RNC and wondering what can possibly happen next. So was there a moment in your mind that you felt like was the most pivotal? Let's start with you, Amy.
Well, it was the debate, actually, because John and I weren't even going to do a campaign book until the debate happens. And then when the debate does happen and Biden has this disaster playing out, that's when our publisher asked us to jump in and do another campaign book. And how could we not do one? I mean, we had no idea what was going to take place, but we knew that the debate in and of itself was a significant moment, and something that rocked the Democratic Party. And on the other side, there was so much electricity as well. So I think that was the most pivotal moment for us, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with Amy, and I mean, I think we were like the rest of America in that, we were looking at a Trump Biden rematch, and we did not find that we didn't think that was going to be like a thrilling story, and or have a lot of interesting twists and turns, and I think that's one of the reasons. I mean, you saw Biden trailing Trump by a close but static margin for months and months and months, and it looked like the election was kind of headed that way. And so we just weren't interested in doing another Trump Biden book. But once we saw the debate, we were like, the next few months are going to be um, unprecedented in American history. And I don't use that term lightly. I don't like using the word unprecedented, but we knew that there was going to be a push to get Joe Biden out immediately. We knew that the result of that was Either Biden was going to be fighting his party the whole way, or there was going to be a new Democratic candidate. We thought it was likely to be Kamala Harris, and so we just, we just thought this is fascinating. This is a history that we want to get inside of and try to tell people a little more about.
I think it's interesting because my brother, who's a political junkie, and I were talking on the telephone. We were talking about the debate and before it happened, and I said, debates really don't move people. I mean, it's no big deal. And in fact, there was a cooking show on. My wife was watching at the same time the debate was, and she wanted to see the cooking show because there was beat Bobby Flay, and there was a guy from Montana that was on it, and he won, and he beat Bobby Flay, by the way. But so I turned the debate on a half an hour late, and the first thing I heard was President Trump as a candidate saying, "I don't know what he just said, and I'm not sure he knew what he just said." And I went, "Holy shit. I mean, really? This is insane." So the question is where did you guys I mean, you guys have done this stuff before. Where did you decide the debate was what pushed your publisher to ask you, but where do you start? I mean, where are you gonna dig into first, and then how you gotta, branch the roots out from there?
So chronologically, we start with the debate. We start actually in Nancy Pelosi's condo as she's watching the debate. She decides, and you know this, Senator, every time there's a debate, political leaders fan out across the country to like host debate parties, and try to get the party energized around it. And Nancy Pelosi doesn't go to a debate party. She's sitting in her condo on the Potomac River watching this debate by herself. And Jim Clyburn also decides not to do any of these debate watch parties, turns down a bunch of them, including the Congressional Black Caucus has one, and he's watching by himself, and donors watching by themselves. And what we concluded from that was a lot of these folks were very worried that it was going to be an embarrassment, or that Biden would lose, and they didn't want to be in a place where they had to explain for him. I don't think anyone suspected that it would be as bad as it was. But that's where we start the story. We go back in time a little bit from there to his debate prep, to some of the moments where there were people that saw him struggling over the course of a couple of years with things that he normally wouldn't have had trouble with before. For instance, not recognizing Eric Swalwell at a congressional picnic, and some of the accommodations his staff was making for him. But basically, we start on debate night and run it through election night, and that's it. Basically it.
And there's some flashbacks, too, where we go back and we look at, as John mentioned, Swalwell and some other moments where people were kind of um, wondering about Biden's state, but clearly afraid to say so. And that's obviously become a big part of the discussion right now, the political discussion and who knew what. And that's why I think there are a lot of arrows being pointed at the Biden camp and Biden specifically himself.
So what do you guys say to people, because I've heard people, mostly Democrats, say in response to your book and Jake Tapper's book, which is suddenly in the headlines, they say, "Hey, this is over. Biden lost. It just seems like these people are going after an old man who lost instead of going after the old man in office tweeting about how Taylor Swift isn't hot anymore." So what do you say to those critics when they say, "Why are you doing this?"
I mean, it is over, but it's not in a lot of ways because, and Senator Tester can talk about this as well, but the Democratic Party is completely lost right now. It's rudderless. It doesn't have a leader. It's trying to it's trying to find its identity, and it's going to be. I mean, I think it's an understatement to say that they're lost in the wilderness right now. I think that it's going to take them many, many cycles to come out of this and figure out what exactly went wrong.
It's also important, I think, Maritza and Senator, uh, to think about this not just as a book about this particular election cycle, but we go through. It's not just a book about Joe Biden and his decline and what fault Biden bears for, and the people closest to him bear for the Democratic defeat, but also looking forward. What are the mistakes that the campaign made when Kamala Harris became the nominee? What were the mistakes that Democrats made in that interim, in that 24-day period between the debate and when Joe Biden passes the baton to her. And on the Republican side, they won, but there are lessons in this book for them as well, about what Trump did right, and what he had done wrong in the past that he corrected for, and some of the things that he did wrong on the campaign trail this time. And I should say also some of the things that Kamala Harris and her team did right. So I think it's a little bit of a blueprint for both parties and for people running campaigns in the future as to what works and what doesn't work. I think all of those things are important for readers that are not that basic headline of throw Joe Biden out because it's easy to do. And by the way, it's tempting for reporters because all the rest of them are going to continue to be in the political space. But the one thing we know is that Joe Biden is not going to be. And so it's very easy as a reporter to lean into the it's all Joe Biden's fault, because there's a way in which you're kind of sucking up to your future sources that way.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because, the presidency, I don't need to tell you guys, this is a massive damn job, and you depend so much on information that you're given from people around you. I mean, it's too big for one mind to understand everything that's going on in the world today, both domestically and foreign. And so I personally don't blame Joe as much as I blame the people around him. I mean, oftentimes the people who are losing their cognitive ability don't realize they're losing their cognitive ability. It's the people around them do. Is that kind of the conclusion you guys came to, or did you come to a different?
I think that's fair for the most part, Senator, but I also think that the um it takes a huge ego to run for president.
Yes, it
And
does.
oftentimes those egos are actually covering for some insecurities. And I think Joe Biden has always been very stubborn um, about how effective he is. He takes everything, as every criticism as a slight. And I think he believed his own hype. He believed he was the only person that could ever beat Donald Trump. So I think I wouldn't take the blame entirely off of him, but I think you're right. I mean, it's the child that sees that their parent can no longer function for themselves before the parent sees it, and so there is blame to go around. Senator, could I ask you something? I'm curious because we reported that you had consultants that were urging you right away, pretty early on, to push for Biden to exit, and that you obviously waited for a while to do that publicly, but you did eventually do it publicly. And I'm curious how you look at, loyalty, how you look at politics in your own home state politics in a situation like that, and how do you judge when it's time to take somebody that you respect, that you regard, that you have some loyalty to, and say, as you did, to publicly come out and say it's time to step aside?
No, I am loyal to a fault. If somebody, if I've got a good employee, that employee can do a lot of stuff that I'm going to overlook because they're busting their ass. I worked with Biden and Biden's crew, more importantly, on that infrastructure bill, and they played a critical role in getting that infrastructure bill written the way it was and the way to get it done. The senators did a marvelous job, but without the folks in Joe Biden's office, we wouldn't have gotten that bill done, and I think it was a game-changing bill. After that debate happened, I had one of the people that were close to Biden call me on the phone. I was on the tractor up here farming, and I said my exact words were, "If this was a one-off, that's okay, because 'cause he'll prove himself as the campaign goes on," and I was assured by that person that this was a one-off, and then he spoke to the NAACP about a week later, and it was the same thing. I don't know if you remember it or not, but it was the same thing. It did not go well, and, uh was obvious to me then because I did have staff tell me, "You need to come out right now, right after that debate and say you need to step down and go." And I said, "No, I'm not gonna do that. I'm just not gonna do that. I owe him more respect than that because of the work we've done together, more with his staff than him, but he's still the boss, okay?" And then when that happened, within a week, it was obvious that I was gonna have to do something that I didn't wanna do, but I knew had to be done, and that was ask him to step down. And, I was late, but I think I was the second one to
You're
do
the
it.
second. Yeah, you were the second.
I was the second one to do it, but the bottom line was is that, with the Inflation Reduction Act, with the PACT Act, with the CHIPS and Science Act, with the infrastructure bill. I had worked a lot with that administration, and I thought those bills were really, really good. So it was really hard for me to say, "Nah, you got to go."
Do you feel like they lied to you? Like, did you ever question them about his mental acuity?
I will tell you the amount I was around him when we did the infrastructure bill. I'm talking about the president a fair amount. And in fact, NBC came out about a year and a half before the election and said, "What do you think of Joe Biden?" I said, "I think he's fine." That little statement, the Republican Party put on the air, right after the debate, and it never went off TV, and it probably cost me 10 points, to be honest with you, because people said, "Geez, John Tester's lying to me. He had to know." Well, they didn't tell you that it was a year and a half out, and like I said, cognitive ability, a year and a half out compared to, a year later is a whole lot different, but I'm making excuses, probably should have never said that because I'm a farmer, I'm not a doctor, and he's 80 some years old, and you gotta know that people start to decline at some point in time, some later than others, but I do think that they weren't honest with me, that's correct. Yeah.
I think there's a point there, though, and you guys talk about it in the book. I mean, there were people within the White House who said, "We really were kept out of the inner circle." I mean, I spoke with President Biden at the White House Christmas party for journalists, and I didn't sense anything like that. So, I think there is a point to be made there about the inner circle, right?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely, and, good days and bad days, for Biden, right? I mean, you could if you weren't around him every day, you might catch him at a good hour, you might catch him at a good day. We reported on our last book, it's, Behind Amie on the Wall, Lucky, that, during 2020, his team was limiting, his schedule, that they were trying not to have, events late at night, because he was all at that point, at least on a physical level, it was taxing and maybe a little bit on a, mental level as well. As the senator knows, there's big days of politicking, especially out on a campaign trail, day after day after day after day. It's brutal, brutal work. I mean, I'm not yet 50, and I would have difficulty maintaining that schedule. But I think i- if you were somebody who was around him, there were enough people that had contact with him that are in the outer ring that reported, that we talked to who said that they were around him at times where he seemed out of it, that if you were in the inner circle, you clearly saw that more often.
Can we kinda shift gears? Do you want can I shift gears, Maritza?
Go ahead. Yeah, this is a great conversation.
So I wanna talk a little bit about Trump and particularly the shooting because it was, amazing to me how quickly he snapped back from that. I mean, that was, quite frankly, pretty damn scary from my perspective as I watched it, on TV. But yet it seemed like he was back on his feet going hard within 3 or 4 days. What did you guys see when you asked questions of people around him as far as from the Trump perspective, what the Trump campaign was doing and how did they get him back on his feet that fast? Because 'Cause I'm gonna tell you what, I don't know that I'd ever wanted to go out in public again. I mean, truthfully, it's pretty wild.
What's fascinating to me is let's start with him when he does get shot. I mean, he knows exactly what to do in that moment, which is to project strength. And he made the race about strength and weakness. And, just that iconic image of him with his fist in the air shouting, fight, fight, fight. Um, I think that that's gonna go down as one of the most memorable political images of our time. But, we have scenes in the book where he is, um, you know, he's right back out there. We take you inside his hospital room, and um he's not down about it. He's actually like lighthearted, and it changes him obviously, and we've seen him at the convention where he feels like a little bit changed by it, and a little um obviously a little bit just torn up by what has happened, for lack of a better word. But he knows what he has to do, and he's back out there. And we talked to some people who were with him right after the assassination, and I think it was like full speed ahead for him. Like, he knew what he had to do, and he's in the middle of a candidate search, and he had spoken to JD Vance the morning of, and he's still kind of figuring out what he needs to do, and is sort of watching the VP, you know, like the VP game kind of play out in front of him. And it's fascinating how he didn't let that get in his way.
And to Amy's point, I mean, this is one of those traits that I think is so communicated to voters through so many ways from Trump. And, some of it's BS and bluster about being strong and whatever, but a lot of it isn't. And what you see is a guy get shot in the ear, an inch from being fatal potentially, who can continue to deal with all of the other things that he has to deal with. And that's a recommendation for the presidency. The You were talking, Senator Tester, about how difficult of a job it is and how you have to deal with all these things. And, this is something where I think everybody would have understood if he took a day or two off, or if he showed up late to the Republican convention. And instead, he continues to do the business that he has to do, as Amy was saying, go through that vice presidential selection process. In the book, we take you on to Trump Force One the next day, and he's flying out to the convention in Milwaukee, and Amy was saying he's having his aides and Senator Graham fight it out in front of him over who should be his vice presidential pick. And he's, enjoying it. He's enjoying watching the spectacle of it. And to the extent that he was changed, I think, the one sort of thing that may have stuck a little bit is that every time someone would mention God or like divine providence in front of him, he would roll his eyes. And then, in that time right after he got shot in the ear, he would stop rolling his eyes. He seemed to accept that the concept that maybe there was some higher power protecting him. I don't know if you talked to him today, he'd still, have that kind of reverence or humility, but certainly in that period right after getting shot, he did for at least a few days.
You really couldn't make it up. That I mean, I remember vividly watching that the day before I flew to Milwaukee for the convention, and then those first days, I'm sure you guys heard the same things. You're gonna see a changed person. You're gonna this there is a there's a different tone coming out of former President Trump at that point, and, then I remember, the night of his speech and following through the transcript, the prepared remarks that we all had, and for a bit, he stuck to those. And then we took a hard right turn of, I don't know, maybe like 20 minutes in.
A hard, angry turn.
Yeah.
And he started savaging his adversaries again, right? Nancy Pelosi and, I mean, all of the grievances that were built up. And I can only think that in his mind, he was like, I have to show that I'm unchanged by this, right? And the best way to show that is to be myself. And I mean, he is himself. Right? Like, we've seen this guy on a public stage for 10 years, love him, hate him, be frustrated by it, whatever it is, like, the guy doesn't really change a whole lot. But he does, and we go through this in the book, he does learn, and a lot of people later in life don't learn. And one of the things that we found in reporting this book from our sources was watching him in this campaign kind of trim his sails at times. He stepped away from a national abortion ban because he was shown that it would limit rights in some of the swing states, and that would be harmful for him. He went from somebody who opposed early voting, and we know that in his heart he hates the idea of people voting on a day other than election day, but he decides, because it is basically budget prudence. Basically, he decides that he's going to promote early voting. So if people vote early, you don't have to keep spending money to get their votes. And his team convinces him that that's a reason to embrace early voting. And you just see, and he keeps his team this time. He doesn't fire anybody. Doesn't fire his campaign manager when things look bad. When Kamala Harris is rising in the polls and he's falling back, and he has this sort of wavering moment where Corey Lewandowski, his 2016 campaign manager, comes back in the picture, and he's trying to get these campaign managers fired and trying to replace them. And eventually Trump says, "Hey, Corey, go back to New Hampshire, go on TV, do whatever you're going to do to support me. But these guys are in charge. I'm going to dance with the ones that brung me." So you can see him learning as a candidate and doing things in 2024 that he didn't in 2020, and reaching out to new voters. to people who weren't part of the political process before. In the 2020 election, from 2016 to 2020, all he did was lean to his base, constantly leaning to his base, trying to drive out more Trump voters than there were Democrats in 2020, and it failed. And so we just see this learning that I think is fascinating.
There's a section in here when you talk about Trump's actual disappointment in the Biden debate performance, because the attention went away from him. So, for people who keep asking, we get a lot of emails about this. What can we do? How do you defeat Donald Trump? Is the answer somewhere in there?
I think the answer is the Democratic Party has to figure out what it is and what its message is and stop going back to the old tired playbook, reinvent, pick up what has worked for them, but fix a lot of things that have not worked for them, including their roots efforts, their messaging, which is, I think, a complete disaster at this point. Their I think, everyone said, "Oh, we have better fundraising. We've outraised and outspent him." That didn't matter. They really have to take a hard look at some of these things that they thought were really working for them, which were not.
And I think to just jump on what Amy said there, I mean, you look at, and I think the senator, I imagine the senator would attest to this, but obviously let him speak for himself. If you're a Democrat running for office, there are so many things that you're not allowed to say, so many policies that you have to endorse wholeheartedly. There's no vibrant debate within the party about what the 21st century Democrat looks like. There's no vibrant debate in the party about, what manufacturing looks like in the United States, what AI looks like in the future, what the future of farming is in the United States, what the future of the entitlement programs are. Democrats have won elections by accusing Republicans of wanting to change Social Security and Medicare for so long that they can't give that up enough to look forward and say, what is it that the Democrats are going to do to save those programs that I think even Trump acknowledges are necessary, in a way that Republicans hadn't before. But like, how do you make sure that Social Security is there, for me and Amy's generation? Ritza, you're a little younger than we are, for your generation, and for our children's generation. And for with Medicare, how do we bring down healthcare costs? We see some of that. Obviously, Obamacare was an effort to insure more people. See some of that on the Democratic side, but I don't think we've seen that sort of full future vision from the Democrats because they're still locked into these positions. And Senator, I'll let you speak for yourself.
I would agree with you. I was treated a little bit different because I came from a purple red state, and so they gave me a lot more latitude to do what I need to do. So I didn't have to, cold-heartedly jump into the platform the way a lot of folks were expected to do. But I think the point you make about what do Democrats stand for and what are they gonna do for rural America? What are they gonna do for urban America? What's their plans for seniors? What's their plans for kids? What's their plans for college education? All those issues are out there. And, the only one that is actually, addresses them a little bit is Bernie, and he addresses them in a way that a lot of people can't buy into, including myself. But the truth is, at least Bernie's out there trying to address those issues, and that's why he's as popular as he is. I think the party as a whole needs to do the same thing. There's no doubt about it because, uh, people are not gonna vote for people who just say, "We're better than those guys," or "That guy's gonna destroy the democracy, so, you gotta vote for me." You gotta have a little more meat to your message than that.
And Senator, do you feel like there's this sort of elitism that has happened over the course of the last couple of decades within the party? I'm curious to see.
Yeah, I mean, look, I guess, I mean, I'm not I mean, so I mean, you guys know this. I mean, I've had a real job my whole life, and it isn't exactly a glitzy job. It's, getting greasy and getting dirty and working on equipment and doing that kinda shit. But so I
Sounds like
don't
heaven.
Yeah, exactly. It is heaven. It truly is heaven. Thanks, John. But the truth is so I don't I don't see it, and I was always taught growing up that you treat everybody as equal. You don't talk down to people. If you wanna gather their respect, you don't act like you know more than them, and you listen more than you talk, which is I'm not what I'm doing right now. But the truth is that that I know there's a lot of folks, by the way, on both sides there that come out and tell people how they should be thinking, and that's not really. I don't think that's how you win elections if it's in a swing state at all. I think you gotta talk. And the other fact is this, and you guys know this. Democrats just haven't been. They've been absent from rural America, and they're more absent now than they were 20 years ago. And they've got to make a concerted effort to get people to go out and get a good platform and talk to rural America. Because the truth is, I believe Democrats have done more for rural America than Republicans have. But you know what? Rural America doesn't know that, and they're not voting for Democrats. So, you gotta figure out how to get out there and talk to them and make sure it matches up with their values. But yeah, the elitism stuff, I'm sure it's out there and I'm sure it exists, but I just don't see it to the extent I hear people talk about it. Let's just put it that way.
I think there's a conversation here to be had too, and Senator Tester kind of talked about it, but, it's this establishment, the establishment running things and not leaving room for individuality, and, I would have died on the hill that Montana was a purple state before the 2020 election margins that I saw, because people really did. They voted for the person, and it's why Senator Tester was, the last standing Democrat elected statewide. But this is true of both parties, and we saw it even with the Democrats and Dean Phillips. When Dean Phillips said, "I'm gonna challenge Joe Biden in the primary," and everyone's like, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" But, you walk that line of not risking your own political future, and also not fracturing your own party by giving opponents a win by saying, "Oh, they're a mess and they don't agree on everything." It's true of both parties. So how do we like cut through that bullshit and actually just like let people run on what they actually believe in?
What a question. What a huge, big
I know.
question. I think I mean, honestly, and I don't mean to sound too nerdy here. Um, I do think a big part of it is the way that campaign finance has evolved over the course of the last 20 years. So um, you had the McCain-Feingold bill that changed the way that fundraising was done, and it really weakened parties in one way, and then you had the whole Citizens United set of decisions from the Supreme Court, which really empowered these outside groups. And I think I think um, it's hard for people who want to run for president to listen to the people on the ground when they know that the money that they're going to need is coming from people who are writing $100 million checks or $10 million checks or whatever it is that is just it's so outsized. And if you are a Bernie Sanders, you are relying on those grassroots checks, and he is on the Democratic side a sort of unique. And I would say in both parties, really kind of a unique figure in terms of the ability to raise that grassroots money and then be responsive to his voters rather than trying to find the voters to be responsive to him based on somebody cutting a 10 or 15 or $20 million check. And we get to the point now where Elon Musk put $250 million into electing Donald Trump. I mean, and we are seeing Elon Musk benefit extremely from his relationship with Donald Trump. Now, I won't say that there was a specific quid pro quo there, but I also could not possibly tell you I was being honest if I didn't see a relationship between those things. So if you're
And
gonna
and all of the Republicans who aren't speaking out about things because they're being threatened with a primary.
right, and that's the other piece, which is redistricting, and it matters a little less on the Senate level, obviously, because you don't redistrict the states, but most of our states are red or blue, and so most of the members of the Senate or the House, or I mean, of the Senate on the Republican side or the Democratic side, like the House and Senate members, their biggest threat is a primary, which empowers the most powerful person in their party to tell them what they can and can't do.
It's
Uh,
exactly.
so if we don't have competitive elections, on a general election basis, you are going to continue to have these siloed parties where, where the basically, the very wealthiest or the very elite in the party as a politician, meaning a president or presidential candidate, is going to dictate what the party policy is and dictate what all the candidates can and can't say.
Senator, not only does he go by JON without an H, but he's talking about campaign finance. I mean, I
Well,
think you have a new best friend.
You know, he's talking my language. I think you're 110% correct. And if I give you a higher number than that, but the truth is that I think all the division, I think all the rancor, I think all the, do it my way or hit the highway, all that stuff is campaign finance. I long for the day, the fact that candidates don't go out and do town hall meetings. They don't even have to go out and have the press interview when they're running. Why? Because they don't need to. They're financed by a bunch of big dollar donors, which is bullshit. Because you lose track of what's important in this country. And by the way, everybody has different things they think is important. I actually think it's a strong middle class. But but look what's going on in Congress right now. I mean, the reconciliation bill is just going to give billionaires and trillionaires more money. You don't have to comment on that, guys. You're in the press, but I just think it's crazy.
Do you guys, covering the campaign, covering Donald Trump as long as you have? I mean, I mentioned at the beginning, I met John at a Trump rally in Montana many years ago. Did
Was
you
he in a cage? Was he in a cage? Was
You
he
were
in?
both in a cage. Yeah, we were both in a cage.
Yeah.
That's the rally that somebody came up next to me and threatened Jim Acosta's life.
I want to be clear. We were in a pen
A
with
pen,
all the
sorry.
other reporters. It's not like Maritza and I were like cage dancing at the Trump rally.
Yeah, we save that for the after party. But, you guys have covered this guy and his policies and his promises for a long time, every song on the playlist at these rallies. So, what we're seeing today, did you anticipate it would be 145% tariffs on China? Did you anticipate we would see people, um, being sent to a supermax prison in El Salvador without any due process? Did you anticipate the talk of suspending habeas corpus?
The scope is surprising, but I think if anyone didn't see this coming, then they should take a good look at themselves. He laid it all out there. He talked about the policies, he talked about tariffs, he talked about these things, and he always takes it to the next level. It's not like you should believe him and then know that he will proceed. And so I don't think anyone is surprised by
There's
it.
also there's also this myth. I will go like this is a parallel of the self-delusion of Democrats with regard to Joe Biden. There's this myth on the Democratic side that Donald Trump doesn't lay out his policies in elections. And they go out there and they say, well, he's not running on substance. And, that may have been true in 2016 where he had like, maybe 3 or 4 positions that were out there. They put out Project 2025, and I don't think there was anybody on the right or the left who actually believed he wasn't gonna try to implement it when he said when he distanced himself. I think everybody on his side knew he was distancing himself for political value, and I think everybody on the other side knew that he was doing that. I mean, it's not just that he has a fully fleshed out policy, he has more fully fleshed out policies on a greater scope of issues than I think I've ever seen from a presidential candidate. He told us exactly what he's gonna do. I said I was surprised by speed and scope. I am surprised by that in terms of just how fast he's been able to do so many things, and some of them will get rejected, and he sees that as a win. If he goes to try to do 100% of his things and he only gets 30% of them, that's better than the 0% that might have happened in the first 5 months of an administration where he tried to go to Congress and get them to do things.
So what comes next? What do you see happening next, A? And B, are you going to write another book about it?
I think that I don't know. It's hard to say where we go from here, but we need a nap first, and then we'll reconvene. Yeah, this we weren't going to do a book, so this book was a lot harder to do, I think, in some ways than our last books. We had a longer runway on the other books, and this one took a lot out of us. But we're so happy that it's been so well received, and it was optioned for a film, and so we're really happy about all of the reception.
Pretty cool.
Wow.
Yeah,
So
but
I gotta ask you just so do you just cold call people and say, hey, we want to talk to you about what's going on with Biden or what's going on with Harris or what's going on with Trump or how do you?
Not just people, 150, more than 150 people they interviewed for this book.
so we sat down in July or August, I think, and we did must have been sometime in July. And we did a spreadsheet. We were like, here's the 300 people that we can think of that we might want to talk to about this. And, so there's a spreadsheet. And some of them were not people that we were going to need to talk to. And some of them were people who were not going to talk to us. Like we knew Joe Biden was not going to sit for an interview for this book. Particularly after the debate, we were pretty sure that that wasn't going to happen. And so we just kind of methodically went through, and of course, we added some people that we ended up talking to that weren't on that original list, and some people fell off, and we didn't get to the 300, obviously. But, you know, that was sort of our emergency break glass, you know, let's sit down and like just map this out immediately. Like, who do we, and we just started calling through. And so, from a lot of them aren't cold calls. We've been dealing with people in both parties for a long time. I was covering the Trump campaign primarily during this period, and Amie was covering the Biden campaign, and we've done a couple previous election books, so we know a lot of the people we were calling, but some of them were first time. And we just said to them, look, our the way that we do this is we're not going to publish anything before the election that comes from one of these interviews, so you don't have to worry that you're going to affect the outcome by saying something. We think that helps people be candid and be willing to talk to us, and we don't name our sources. And I know there are people that have problems with that, but I think if you read this book, you will recognize a lot of what you saw, and you will see a lot that explains what you saw that you didn't really know before, based on the behind the scenes things that were shared with us.
Wait, was John Tester on the list of 300?
People close to John Tester and John Tester were on the list of the 300, but we can't say whether we spoke to Senator Tester or not because we don't want to identify
That's right.
anybody we didn't talk to, other than I just told you Joe Biden. But we start saying who we did or didn't talk to, then everybody else can figure out who we did based on who we didn't.
Thanks
Yeah.
a lot, Lisa. You blew the.
Can I ask you a quick question? Just because I'm a baseball guy, I'm wearing a Washington Nationals cap. There's a baseball bat in the corner of your office there, and I'm curious. There's got to be a story behind that baseball bat.
Thank you. This is great.
So I've caught a lot of shit about that baseball bat from one Marisa Giorgio. That is a baseball bat that I received um, after I left office from a supporter of mine that said, "Hey, we think you should have this. This is it's nothing special about it other than it's a major league bat." And so I never, all the bat. I played softball, so I've got a bunch of aluminum bats. I don't have any wooden ones, and I think that there's no really there other than I just think it's pretty cool to have a wooden Major League Baseball bat in my house.
I keep a wooden bat. It's my home security system.
Yeah, well, that's good. That's good. I keep a 357 as my home security.
They're just frowned upon where I live on Capitol Hill. It turns out it's hard to acquire a legal weapon in Washington D.C.
Yeah.
But Senator Tester he sometimes, like, he wore what were you wearing, a Blue Jays hat a few weeks ago?
No, it was a Montreal Expos hat.
Sorry, Expos.
Which is the first generation of the Washington baseball team. So
That's right.
Okay, so for people who listen to our podcast, Grounded, they generally are politically minded. And if you have any interest in politics, this book is a page turner. It's very fascinating. It's interesting. I lived through some of it. And I mean, it's so well written. You will learn so much. The book, again, is called Fight Inside the Wildest Battle for the White House. And we want to thank the authors, John Allen and Amie Parnes, so much for being with us today.
absolutely. Thanks for being with us, Amie and John. Thank you.
Thank you both.
How is that for you? I mean, you lived through this whole era from your experience. I lived through it as a journalist, going, to the convention and covering the conventions, and it was wild. It was wild how much happened in such a short amount of time. How is it for you to kind of revisit that and think about that?
It's good. I mean, it's fine. I mean, elections are a pain in the ass, but they're absolutely necessary, and it's about accountability. And people go to the polls and they vote, and you either win or you lose based on how people feel about the job you've done or the job you intend to do. And so it's good. But I will tell you that there are a ton of people that work on these campaigns that some don't care, but most of them, the vast majority of them, work as hard or harder than the candidate does. And that's pretty amazing. because most of them are younger folks in their 20s, and they're just busting their butt trying to do what they think is the right thing for the country. And I just got a lot of respect for young folks who take, oftentimes a year or more out of their life to go out and work on these campaigns. So it's interesting. And in the presidential stuff, I mean, the Senate is one thing. The Senate's probably a step or two below the presidency, but the presidency is just absolutely all consuming. There's so much stuff going on that you've gotta have so many good people that are not only running a campaign that connects with people, but also, putting information in front of the candidate that's good, truthful, solid information that they can make decisions off of, on which direction they wanna take the campaign from a policy standpoint. So it's pretty interesting. It's an interesting process, and it's very, very grueling. There's a lot of folks that contact me about running for whatever, governor, house, senate, and,
President, homeowners association.
not me. I'm talking they wanna run for the position. They're not talking about
Oh,
me.
oh, oh.
And, all I tell them is that, it's a leap of faith, because there's a lot of work you have to do, and you don't know if it's gonna do one damn bit of good. It's all about catching fire and getting momentum and making sure people understand what you have to say and that people connect up with what you have to offer. And if you can do that, you got a chance. That doesn't mean you're going to win, but you got a chance of winning if you can do that.
I think it's really hard to predict anymore too. I mean, there's so many variables that come into play and huge events or gaffes that would have been just a political killer decades ago just aren't anymore. I mean, I remember I was in Philadelphia for the debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. And that was the night when he went on his rant about they're eating the cats, they're eating the dogs. And I went back to my hotel afterward. And on my way to the hotel, that was when Taylor Swift came out and endorsed Kamala Harris. And I got into the elevator, and there was a young, Trump surrogate on the campaign staff, and he just looked completely dejected. And it looked like how the Democrats looked the night of the Joe Biden debate. And then it turned around. So I think some of this is hard to predict.
Oh, absolutely. It's hard to predict. And timing is everything. I mean, it's what's going on, the few days before the election when people vote. And it's different now with early voting and stuff, but it still makes a big difference. If the wrong things happen a week before the election, it could sink 2 years of really, really hard work by a lot of different people.
Okay, so we had John Allen wearing a Washington Nationals hat.
Yeah.
You are wearing it looks like a simple gray hat with the state of Montana on it.
Know what? You've gone up since the old M Sun hat. You're doing a lot better now, seeing what these hats are about. So that's good. Yeah, you're right. That's the state of Montana. Uh, I was gonna put a little dot where you live and a little dot where I live, but I don't wanna take a Sharpie and screw this pen up. So to the
Don't ruin the hat, yeah.
yeah, so it is where it is.
Okay,
Still
pop quiz though. What is the western border, the western state line of Montana? What is that actually?
it's the state line with Idaho.
No, no. It is Richard Nixon's profile. You've never heard this?
I've never heard this, no. The
One of my
mass
college professors pointed out that the shape of the western edge of Montana, if you look at it, looks just like Richard Nixon's profile.
boy, he was drinking a lot that day.
I think it was Harry Fritz, if I can remember, but I don't know.
Harry
Oh,
Fitz,
yeah, do you know him?
yes, Abraham Lincoln, man. He the legislature, and he'd play Abraham Lincoln, and
That's right.
and then he'd chew us all out for not doing our job. It was good.
Maybe
It
you
was
should go do that. Maybe you should dress up as Abraham Lincoln and go to DC and chew them out for not doing their job.
I don't have the hair for it, so it'll
Uh,
work.
yeah, you got that flat top. All right. We wanna thank our guests so much today, John Allen and Amie Parnes. Make sure you check out their book. We wanna
thank our friends at Pearl Jam for letting us use their music. We will continue to put Johns on the show that spell it Jon. You can find us on Substack, Blue Sky, Instagram, and YouTube. You can shoot us an email anytime at groundedpcast@gmail.com. Hit like, hit subscribe, leave a review if you feel inclined. And did I miss anything?
Yeah, what was the name of their book?
Fight Inside the Wildest Battle for the White House by Jonathan Allen and Amie Parnes.
That's it. And with that, tally ho.